Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, friends and colleagues from across the world. Thank you for joining us today for our first session webinar with a very special guest I'm very excited about, Dr. John Cutter. Thank you for joining us today.
By all means, thank you for having us, Dr. Shaw. Glad to be here.
This is a very exciting session for our colleagues, not just in dentistry, but across the spectrum of medicine, where we are looking at informatics to improve our lives. But before we get into your bio and get into all of that discussion, just some housekeeping stuff for the Global Summits Institute viewers. Good news thus far, the World Gala that we are going to be conducting in June of next year has reached over 300 reservations by key opinion leaders from across the world, innovators, researchers, clinicians, government people, military people, you name it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you guys to come out and meet these people, shake their hands, expand your own operations, and grow unlike anything else that is possible in 2023 in terms of conferences. So just a quick rundown again for those new to the session. We're going to have about 1,000 doctors there, 500 on the conference side with the official Italian Dental Association, the national one. And on the gala side, mostly evening and night events, we're going to have a red carpet event. We're going to meet the first day for the award ceremony, actually. So people get to know each other. And then the subsequent 2 days, we're going to be on the island, all interacting and networking and building the future of medicine and healthcare. That's the intent of this, this event. So there's also a concert going on. We're on a 5-star resort. If you need information or if you need to, I will put the links, the 4 links for travel, for registration of the gala or Congress, and so on, and for exhibitors also in this discussion at the end. But you can always find everything about us by following the hashtag Doctor2Doctor, T-O Doctor to Doctor, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it. And you'll find those links readily there to register. We would love to host you in Sardinia. Actually, Dr. Cutter will be there himself, and that's going to be an exciting time to actually have the opportunity and pleasure to shake his hand. So that's all I got in terms of housekeeping stuff. Dr. Cutter, let's introduce you a little bit to the audience so they get to know you a little bit. You've been in the dental industry for 45 years and has contributed in various achievements in healthcare, dental education, research, marketing, online platforms, patient staff provider relationships, and contract vendor negotiations. He has been instrumental in oral research as both a principal dentist with the NHANES program of the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. It's the leading federal agency, as well as currently serving as the president of TeethCloud, a 30-nation global collaborative that seeks to decrease oral health inequalities by means of dental informatics and the focused professional expertise of its members, clinicians, educators, and researchers, which some of them I have had the pleasure to meet. Amazing team. A sought-after international speaker attested to Dr. Cutter's overview of 22,000 followers on LinkedIn alone. He's a recognized key opinion leader for the future of oral health care. It's a great honor to have you with us, Dr. Cutter.
By all means, and thank you for having us. I'm looking forward to this and truly enjoy interfacing with any platform of doctors who unite together for the greater good. So thank you again.
So most of my colleagues will look at this and they'll say, well, informatics, this sounds like some kind of mathematics. And they don't really, we don't understand, but we use informatics in our daily lives in many, many different ways. You guys have taken it to a whole different level. But the simple things that we use all this technology for is what informatics is is essentially about. So for my colleagues that are into robotics and artificial intelligence, they're going to want to listen to you, Because the problem that we have, Dr. Cutter, is the bigger organizations are hard to take on as a single sole proprietor doctor. But informatics can change the playing field for everyone, so it's a little bit more even. Please explain to us in a nutshell, what is informatics? How can it benefit doctors?
Basically, and that you're absolutely right. That's a pushback that we hear from any number of practitioners is they see us coming, they hear the term informatics, and they think all we are is number crunchers and epidemiologists. But it's much more than that, is I'll explain as we get farther into the presentation today, and covers a much broader surface area than just the hard data science and the analytics. But that ultimately is key. And without that foundation, we really don't know what we don't know. And I'll try to enlarge upon that. Even with as far as we've come, and I cover a fair amount of territory since my graduation in 1976, that was just shortly after the advent of the first computers hitting the marketplace in 68. And we were still largely paper-based. And at that point, trying to metrically identify parameters within a practice beyond just simple management revenue models and income models was a daunting task. We have the technology to do much, much more today. When you talk about robotics, when you talk about AI, that technology is in place. What we don't have yet is data, and that's key. So the question then becomes, how do we get that? And it's more painless than people imagine at that point.
Wow. So, as a sole proprietor, what does one start to advance their practice into a scenario where they are applying informatics versus a tremendous human labor that also carries a lot of error with it in terms of support staff?
Exactly. And, the pandemic did no one any favors by putting people behind the revenue nut as badly as it was. And I'll explain a little bit of that history in just a moment. But now that we have come out of that to a greater or lesser degree, dentists and oral health professionals and health professionals in general are still nose down trying to recapture those revenue models. And in the process, you can't blame the practitioner for saying, this is all very well and good, and we appreciate what you're trying to do, but I just don't have that time. Although there are certainly individuals within the practice setting who could be tapped to do just that. And once you get behind the ethos of informatics and the potential of metrically identifying the parameters of each staff member, you'll find that revenue becomes less and less a concern, because you'll find yourself breaking goal year after year after year, as we did way back in my practice days between 2000 and 2008. And all of that had to do with simply giving staff the freedom to understand what their metrics were and then making them responsible for achieving those metrics. That becomes surprising, because at that junction, if you come to the average practitioner and say, tell me who your average patient is, most of the time they won't be able to tell you with any definitive aspect. But I can look at you and say, my average patient was female. She was somewhere between the age of 18 and 42. 75% of the time she was insured, 25% of the time she paid cash. She was generally 3 years out of care, and her initial investment for treatment was somewhere between $1,800 and $5,000. She had 2.5 kids. She had a husband who was generally lower level white collar. The wife was the first person to come in. The children followed a week later, and the husband trailed in about 6 weeks after that. once you start feeling the heft of that information, there's an awful lot you can do within the practice setting. Is that strictly the responsibility of the dentist ultimately or the oral or the health professional? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is. Do they need to be doing it day in and day out? No, but if you really tempt me, I've already predicted that the day isn't that far away to have a dedicated IT assistant within the practice setting.
Wow. How exciting. Actually, this brings me up to a question. When I went through an MBA program, they were telling us, dump some money into different venues and then study, find out which one worked, and then dump the rest of your money in there if you're advertising. There's not really a structured scenario in dentistry. We sometimes put so much money into an empty hole trying to acquire new patients that it becomes exhausting, and then you kind of lose the whole interest in continuing to do that. But informatics obviously is kind of like if I had an example for the implantologist is doing it free-handed versus a guide. You could do it
Right.
pretty accurately if you had informatics at your disposal. Now, so in that scenario, you're saying that even though like the social media pages let you pick the demographics and things that you want to market to, there is a better way of using informatics for medical professionals?
And I always am slightly reluctant to make it sound like a Travelocity commercial, but that's exactly what it is. Where do you want to go today? What's most important to you within your professional context? And are you part of a larger associative organization, or are you still within the cottage industry? Either way, you benefit from those metric acquisitions in informatics. And even more so when we start expanding the definition of that, which the professions have actually done. So it's not just number crunching anymore. But yeah,
Gotcha.
at that point, I think you're absolutely right. And part of that is because when I graduated from dental school, a blow in and go in dental practice was $150,000 a year with a 50% overhead. The young man I sold my practice to back in 2008, I believe, was just north of about 700,000. And before she passed away, Sally McKenzie, who was a great gal in practice management, said, I've got clients who've been in practice 22 years and they can't break below 60% overhead. Wrap in a 30% tax bracket. You tell me how a young practitioner is making money these days. So it's the more instruments we have to help lighten that burden, the better off we'll be.
Since very exciting. I'm just getting the messages on the people that have a big admiration for you. Dr. Bob Pick, he sends his greetings.
Oh,
He says you're one of the most honest persons he knows, which is a great thing, and that he has known you for 38 years. So
ask Bob how many people he actually knows. No, Bob is a pioneer. Bob is a pioneer. He was out there. I worked with Terry Myers when Terry and his brother were developing the ophthalmic laser into oral use, the Nd:YAG. Bob was the guru for CO2, and then there was Kim Kutch out on the West Coast in Oregon doing argons. And back in that day, there were only three modalities. You could either do argon, Nd:YAG, or CO2, and Bob really planted the flag. So I love Bob Pick to pieces, and thank you, Bob. That's very nice. So
yes, we are very fond of Dr. Pick. He's a big supporter of the doctor-to-doctor movement. So with that said, Doc, I don't have any expertise in this field. Please go ahead and educate us about informatics.
Sure. Let me share a screen with you and take you through what is just a very simple thumbnail. Of course, we can't. There we go. We can't teach the world completely about informatics in a 30 or 40-minute venue, but we can give you a good overview, and we can give you a little bit of a history of how this journey started with us and has continued to the current day. And if we're looking for a correlative title to all of this, maybe the simplest phrase is, how do you know? And that's a phrase that has come to me time and time, or that I ask time and time again, especially in the face of medical and dental missions that we bump into globally. Because invariably I get the same answers to the questions when I say, did you do a good job? And we hear people say, oh yeah, I did a great job. How do you know? Did you take data? No. Are you coming back to the same population in any longitudinal period of time? Well, no, but we set up a tent city and we saw 1,000 people and we extracted 1,000 teeth. And we spent 3 great days on one of your national beaches. To my way of thinking, and to be intellectually honest, that doesn't help a soul. But worse yet, we don't know the outcome of that intervention. We don't know if it's better. We don't know if it's worse. And I honestly think that if we parse that, you'll decide, likely as I have, that we then end up taking a seriously acute care problem and we turn it into a monstrous chronic care problem. And it was on the heels of that when I first got to the Philippines, which is now my residence or my resident country, that after deciding I wasn't really retired, I went around to the powers that be and said, show me your databases, because the databases are going to tell us how we know. And then at that point, we can run informatics against that data, do the analytics, and we'll understand a whole lot more about what the problem we may be facing is. And what I found out is we didn't have databases in the Philippines, or at least nominally the databases we had with the National Medical Examination and Diagnostic Survey were, as of now, about 18 years out of date. And it was at that time that I bumped into a software dental platform for management that had been developed out of the Netherlands under the group dentalcharting.com. And I really enjoyed this software. Number one, I thought it was an excellent entry-level software for first-time end users. It didn't have all the bells and whistles of some of the big four, like Dentrix and SoftDent and EagleSoft, that would be an obstacle to first-time end users. But it wasn't so soft, it wasn't so weak that it didn't have some clout to it. And more importantly, what I really enjoyed about it was the fact that it also had a periodontal e-chart that was very, very similar to the ISIS programs that I was using with the NHANES studies through Westat Corporation and the CDC. So at that point, we started using this platform as a simple data acquisition tool. And the wonderful thing about this software was that it had same-day real-time analytics. The data that went in, we could pull right back out that very moment, and we could start looking at. And as we added to that data, it would update by the acquisition. And that had real appeal to it. And over the past couple of years, they've added indices such as DMFT, but even more importantly, they've added CAST, which is the Caries Assessment Spectrum and Treatment Index in cariology, which we think is a much superior index to simple DMFT and ICDOS, because it tells a better story of the history of the tooth, from it being a sound tooth to something that's been lost because of disease. So as we got into the field and we started doing the numbers, what we found out was that Here in the Philippines, with 110 million individuals, we've only got one dentist for every 70,000 school children. And we only have about 18 government dentists per million population. And when we look at disease prevalence, we see that about 92.4% of the population has some type of caries. And when we start parsing even into the pediatric populations, we see that about 97.1% of 6-year-olds have caries, 78.4% of 12-year-olds have caries, and 74% of that population has gingivitis. A good deal of this, and again, the reason we don't know what we don't know is that when we look at that 110 million individuals, only 10% ever see a dentist. Let me put that another way. 90% of our 110 million people, from cradle to grave, never, ever, ever see a dentist. 70% never see a physician. So again, we just don't know what we don't know. And the only way we're ever going to find out is to develop solid, valid databases. And when we get into the field, especially with those pediatric cases, we see disease. We don't see restorative care, such that the field work that was originally done in 2016 that first initially looked at 8,000 individuals in 42 different schools, and then was extended to another 3,000 individuals over the years following that, showed DMFT for males here at about 9.6 and for females at about 13.7. Which is why the Federation Dentaire Internationale lists the Philippines as #1 in the Asia Pacific theater for caries incidence at that point. It was because of that that we then took those findings to 3 successive FDIs and presented there at the World Dental Congress, 2016 in Poznan, Poland. In Madrid, we extended that to include undergraduate dental students as potential data acquisition manpower. We extended that after Madrid in 2017 to Buenos Aires in 2018, where we said, you know, it's nice to have 10,000 dental students in an urban location, but at the end of the day, they have to be students. But what would happen if we had peer-to-peer public health data acquisition through dedicated offices and operations of healthcare? And it was at this point that FDI was nice enough to look at us and say, look, you just don't have a tool, or you don't have a product here. You have a bona fide global research tool. Take that out for a spin and see what else you can find out. And that ended up in 2019 in Brisbane with the International Association of Dental Research at the Asia Pacific region that talked about e-charting in epidemiological surveys and the analytics and informatics that can accrue because of that. That was 2019, and that was November of 2019, and 2 months later, the transformative pivot of where we are today hit all of us. And in actuality, I'm a big fan of COVID-19 because without COVID and the 2 years where, in the case of Manila, we were on literal lockdown, we couldn't have accomplished what occurred without it. If the industry was still moving in the direction it was moving pre-pandemic, there wouldn't be this emphasis on informatics that we have now. A lot of it was due to the fact that it drove us to our desks. And at that junction, we reached out to the then 10 nations who were cooperating with us and collaborating with us and said, what happens once we get through all this? Where's the profession going to end up? And the answers that we started getting were all attached to the common thread of dental informatics. And that included all of its various parameters, which includes dental data science, as well as artificial intelligence, telehealth, and public oral health. Those were the four legs of the stools that we heard over and over and over again. And at that point, we said, well, obviously, we just can't go through life using a software platform that we've basically modified to do field work. We need a much bigger tent to include these emphases, as well as bring professionals together where they can be assured that they're contributing to and receiving valid, vetted data, as well as bypassing a lot of the misinformation that was rife during the pandemic. And that was the beginning of the growth of Teeth Cloud. Teeth Cloud, for all intents and purposes, is founded on the concept, as Dr. Shaw was saying, that there is a way to decrease global oral health inequalities by means of informatics, and that while we believe there can be no health without oral health, by the same token, there can't be any oral health solutions without valid data. And dental informatics and all of its permutations is what lends itself to that validity. So our members now have a platform on which they can connect. They can provide a larger exposure for their own work and outcomes, as well as bring to a larger global audience's attention those challenges within our profession and communities that need addressing. And perhaps the simplest way of expressing this is that Teeth Cloud is a not-for-profit think tank whose thought leaders' expertise is brought to bear with those programs and the efforts of its members to secure the greatest and most positive outcomes at the end of the day. And it all boils down to data and grabbing that data. And so it begs the question, how much data is out there currently being created? And if we look at the daily influx right now across the board, we're finding out things that say that we're seeing about an upload of 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day. You don't have to do the math. That's 2.5 with 18 zeros behind it. There are at least 3.5 billion Google searches, and that's 70% of the marketplace. There are other search engines out there. So there are, in fact, about 5 billion searches worldwide. 300 million Facebook photos are uploaded every day. 100 million Instagram stories are posted every day. And if we parse it down to the minute, we see 16 million text messages, 156 million emails with 103 million of additional spam right behind those. In service industries, we see $52,000 worth of Venmo transactions happening every minute, and we see 46,000 Uber trips being scheduled. So how about healthcare? Well, basically the same applies. Hospitals are uploading about 50 petabytes of data per year. That's a 36% annualized data growth rate by 2025. And it's been estimated global healthcare as a big data marketplace is valued at around 32.9 billion as of last year. And the prediction is it will reach 105 plus billion by 2030. That's a compound annual growth rate increase of about 14% from 2022 to 2030. Put it another way, our healthcare data is roughly doubling every year. And by 2025, that data will double every 73 days. That is the enormity of the information that is starting to come from us. By the way, 90% of that data has just been generated in over the last 2 years. So there is a huge eruption of data out there, and it just begs to be captured. Why the rapid growth rate? Well, basically, in a word, it's an aging population. And as Malcolm Muggeridge used to say way back in the day, Science has done a disservice to nature in basically extending life beyond the age of 40. But regardless of what St. Muggs used to say, good for us, because not only is there the possibility of an extended life, but there should be the possibility of an extended quality of life. And to that degree, as we see those populations age, it basically begs the question that an aging population will also require more healthcare services, as well as we will find that we are having to deal with more complex healthcare services. And the trends that have been resulting from that, of course, are digital transformation, artificial intelligence. We're seeing a whole interconnectivity of an internet of healthcare things, which you can include wearables. And we're also seeing such things as mobile mental health care treatments by way of cell phone mediated interventions. One of the things that TFCloud is currently doing is we have an ongoing survey of dental students to assess the impact that COVID-19 had on their emotional and mental well-being, because this was a population of the profession that was really out there crying in the wilderness without a great number of people listening to them. And we're finding some interesting things. That program has been ongoing for about 4 months, and it'll continue for another 2 before we start doing the parsing of the results. And then no sooner than we get done with that, then we're going to start addressing the very same issues with licensed professionals. Speaking of artificial intelligence, too, not long ago, I was in conversation with Nick Lowe, who's the British Consul General of Kolkata, and his assertion is that by 2029, AI will contribute 1.2% annually to global GDP. So where does that leave dentistry? And you have to ask when you look around the landscape, because there's still an enormous amount of paper-based data acquisition, just from the standpoint of simple charting within the office and record keeping. And if you look around the environment, as I have here, you may still see 3x5 cards, which is something my father used to use. And so the question is, what year was that? And basically, that was 1952. For those of us who graduated in 76, you were probably familiar with the green bar and simple either bullseye or modestly anatomical dental charts. But even that was 1968. Or maybe you were sophisticated enough to use the Virginia Commonwealth University's dental segmented chart that brought in alphanumerics and then basically used every facet within oral health as its own particular record. But that was only until 1992. And yet we know it's 2022 right now. And the public has started to expect that a professional worth his or her salt will be at least digital. And we would hope that you would be more than that, you would be informatics based. But when we look at those programs, we find that still too many of those platforms are in-house server based and don't connect to the cloud. And that then becomes an issue, because we need to start taking that data out of those vertical silos, and we need to start comparing it to find out just what the potential will be for us. So we have new instruments in our armamentarium, and beyond our hand instruments, we're now dealing with electronics. We're dealing with cloud-based servers, and there are absolute insights to be gained from all of this. In our cases, what we have seen, especially here in the Philippines, it leads to simple data acquisition and analytics to identify outcomes. We can start comparing intra and interpopulation parameters. And we can also utilize new indices such as CAST, the Caries Assessment Spectrum and Treatment Index, for much more salient measures. And as I alluded to earlier, CAST, I think, in my opinion, far outweighs simple ICDOS indices and DMFTs. I think it's definitely time for DMFT to go by the wayside and be replaced by something which is more functional, such as CAST. And the simple answer to that is that if you have a DMFT, say, if you have a diseased, missing, and filled tooth index where an individual has 2 diseased teeth, 2 missing teeth, 2 filled teeth, you have an overall DMFT score of 6. But if you as a provider intervene and you fill 2 of those diseased teeth, now you have 0 diseased teeth, 4 filled teeth, and 2 missing teeth. The overall score is still 6. You can't tell me from that data whether you've made an improvement or whether there's been just a static flatline to that individual's progress. With CAST, we see better we see better identification of outcomes because we now look at these from a pre-morbid, morbid, and mortal standpoint that gives us a much more historical, accurate measure of the tooth from a point at which it was once sound to the point at which it was lost because of disease. And that was well documented at the ISDH presentation by one of our board members, Rose Nobley, who presented that to the Global Dental Hygienists Association there with the work that she had done while she was in the Philippines. It also leads us to basically a reduction in errors. When we compare paper dental charts to e-dental charts, the errors that accrue in paper-based systems is significant, to the tune of 19.3% in those cases, compared to e-dental charting, which only allows 0.84% in our study in 2017, sorry. But pay attention to the data points. And if you don't think that you're constantly going through data, in a simple visual exam for a new patient, you, in your 15 to 30 minutes, however long you spend with that patient, are actually accessing and covering about 15,000 separate data points. And that is information that we desperately would like to see to find out just exactly what that drives us to. Because then at that point, we can make comparisons. We can take a look and we can make regional comparisons, as was done by the WHO in their recent study. And we can start looking at not only city to city, we can look at country to country. We can also then take it and drill down and basically look at metrics that are specific to current trends or occurrences, such as what was occurring in the pandemic at that point. As far as whether it is from a management standpoint or whether it's from a healthcare delivery standpoint or both, that data is still significant. And more importantly still is the fact that The dental informatics, worth its salt, should give us same-day real-time analytics. It shouldn't be something that we have to go back in and tinker with. Once we start adding or subtracting data, those tumblers and those metrics should repopulate automatically at that point for a better understanding of disease prevalence and outcomes overall. So back to Teeth Cloud and our banner cries. There's no health without oral health. There's no oral health solution without valid data. But today, every practitioner, every practice is a virtual research hub. From the populations that you see, whether those are in practice or those are community outreach, that go into the cloud, that then can be accessed from the cloud externally and distantly, those are data columns that now we can start using to the benefit of our national citizens, to our global citizens, but more importantly, to tell us the things that we didn't know in the past. For instance, if I ask you who's responsible for production in your office, you'll likely say, well, I am and my staff. But in reality, when we look at the metrics, the person who is the primary controller of your production is your scheduler, your receptionist. If we ask you who's responsible for patient referrals, we find that the metrics point wholeheartedly to the dental hygienist and the relationships that she builds within the practice at that point. And as we were talking with Dr. Shaw earlier, who's your average patient? What are the metrics that basically drove them to you? For those of you old enough to remember the book, The 5 Cows, that was the way we used to identify patients, whether they were scientific or preservational or aesthetic, and so on. We have a much sharper instrument to basically start identifying those issues. But more importantly, where are the communities that need our intervention the most, and how can we best bring those to bear at that point? So what was originally a conversation in 2019 is now a full-blown reality. And the new language is dental informatics. If we in Teeth Cloud have a pipe dream, it would be within the next year or two to identify 50 to 100 practices globally who would like to participate with us and serve as one of those virtual research hubs. You don't have to go out in the field, although that's encouraged, but just doing what you do on a day-to-day basis will give us a wealth of information that we can then start looking at. And not the least of which is an interesting pushback from our medical colleagues. Dentistry of late has been very insistent on the fact that there are 200 systemic relationships between oral disease, especially periodontal health, and systemic well-being. But medicine of late has been pushing back against that statement, saying, not so fast. Those aren't causalities, those are correlations. Okay, good enough. But let's keep accumulating the data to see if the correlations become more specific or more unified, and in some cases may lead to certain causations in certain places. Those of you in cardiac care, I would love somebody to do a study on lingual clefting, clefting in the tongue as a possible precursor to cardiac predisposition. And we can talk about that at a later date. But the question is, what questions do you have? And the only way we'll know is to collect or to ask the questions and then collect the data. And informatics is the language that we'll all start to speak at that point. So at the end of the day, we'd more than welcome those in the oral health profession, and others, because we do have, of our 30 nations represented, 60 thought leaders that are in dentistry, dental hygiene. Some are students in both of those areas, and we also have thought leaders in allied stakeholder positions who may or may not be dentists or previously dentists, but also embrace the concept of dental informatics. So we'd be happy to talk more with you about those things and programs that you might like to see in your particular community. And you can find us at www.teethcloud.org, and we're more than happy to foster those conversations at this point. So at that point, Kianar, I'm going to turn this back to you at that junction.
Thank you so much. It's very honorable what you're doing, and the information that you just revealed to us. So, Doc, if people go, you're looking for professionals and students that can contribute, and I completely agree with what your website says here. And I'd like to get maybe a screen share going on this in a second. Can you tell us a little bit about how to register for the teethcloud.org and what people can expect when they're a member?
Anyone can become a global member at this point. If you feel that you would like to be a thought leader, if you think you have expertise that bears directly on some of these, by all means, if you go to the landing page and click on become a global member, you can also browse our thought leaders, and it's an impressive bunch and a diverse bunch. And as you were saying, Dr. Shaw, you've met a number of them. Dr. Rick Simpson down in Tuscaloosa, who's doing some wonderful work with Holland Holland Health. Gustavo Molina, who you just had on the screen. Gustavo's in Argentina. And he also holds down Hong Kong and China for us. He's got 19 pages of citations in his CV. These are studies in humility for me. Allah Kari, who I'm absolutely convinced will be the person who writes the protocol for teledentistry in educational settings. Maria Kunstadter, who's a co-founder of the teledentists in the US. Shebi Kahabuka, who is our thought leader in Tanzania. She's currently engaged in a program studying dental mutilation as a cultural aesthetic. And then certainly people like Dan German, who just ended up a first round of funding for his company, OrthoBrain. And this guy's, you can watch this guy. I mean, he is a game changer as far as distance health intervention for the sake of orthodontics. Jo Franken, who is is the principal author of CAST, the Caries Assessment Spectrum and Treatment. Clarissa Pei, who did that initial Adopt a School study in the Philippines with 8,000 school children. Just great people. Anyone can apply to become a thought leader. There is a process that we vet those individuals, but it's a simple process. And there's plenty of room, and especially our students. You know, I would love to see more. I have a soft spot in my heart having taught dental students and dental hygiene students, and I would love to see more, because you know that's where the tree will be planted from the fruit that's budding now at that point. So you bet.
Well, I highly encourage our colleagues to join. And you see, Maria is going to actually be at the World Gala, so we get to have.
We just spoke Friday night at what we call the teethcloud Virtual Open Bar, which is just a kibitz session for our thought leaders and anyone who would like to show up and tell us what's going on. And Maria is in the process, as are a couple of thought leaders, to develop a forum within the website where now you can actually, the world at large can reach out to these thought leaders and ask questions, or they can start bringing areas of mutual concern. And then we'd like to think that that will eventually be taken to our opportunities tab, turn into something of a virtual roundtable R&D, and then maybe some templates will come out of that we can take for a spin in the world. So, yeah,
That's
plenty
amazing.
plenty.
So, Doc, what's your this is amazing what you're doing for the global oral health. I saw on your website that without health, with oral health, there is no health, and you're very, very correct. I really myself look forward to shaking your hand in Sardinia and meeting you in person and having you back on the show to give us some progress. I did conduct a video call with you some time ago, and you guys showed me all of this wonderful systems that you guys are working on. Who was that mathematician gentleman? He was very, very sharp. Very impressed.
He is the president of dentalcharting.com. He's also the chair of TeethCloud. His name is Wouter Put. He's in Leiden in the Netherlands. And he is a mechanical engineer. He was the individual who put together the software platform to begin with. And he will be soon coming to the Philippines. There will be some news, hopefully coming of all of that. As well as possibly some programs that we're trying to triangulate between the United States and the Philippines and Indonesia for online learning programs. So yeah, again, we're back to the Travelocity commercial. Where do people want to go today? And as counterintuitive as that sounds, it has worked surprisingly well, because it brings us so much more diversity and so many more challenges that we might not have ever thought of utilizing the platform for. So
exciting. I'm so glad one of our colleagues is in the background doing this, because this is what we need as sole proprietors, independent thinkers, people that put more value in the patient-doctor relationship than their corporate masters. We really appreciate you. And the Global Summits Institute appreciates you, and we would like to continue our collaboration and see where we're going to be in a few years. Dr. Cutter, thank you so much for coming on a Sunday, contributing your time.
By all means.
Selflessly.
By all means. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Hopefully, we'll have you back next year.
And we'll see you in June. We're looking forward to it. So
definitely
be well.
Thank you so much. You too. Take care in the Philippines. I know it's almost 2 o'clock over there. See you. All right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.